Kia ora everyone, I'm Bryce, and I'm trying to work on a craft project here, and keep the momentum going with making YouTube stuff. So, I have here a skull. A fake skull. I do want to just be very specific, thank you YouTube. And what I've done is I've hacked it up. I've cut out the eye socket and the base of the skull. I've cut the back off of it on an angle so that I can attach it properly to this turnstile that's going to serve as the base for a dice rolling tray slash rolling tower, I guess. And I have the lower jaw there that I have separated from it. It did have like pegs sticking out of it that meant that it could attach to the skull and hinge, but I cut those off. And now I have this, which, yes, I did all of this off camera, and it's because I don't have the facilities right now to, like, use my rotary tool, my Dremel, so I did all of this with a box cutter, and that's not a super safe thing to do. Thankfully, this is quite soft plastic. I don't really want to deal with recording myself if I'm to accidentally cut my hand or something. So, we've gotten to this point, and now you will witness me trying to figure out how to put some sort of, like, funnel within the skull. We're just gonna go with, like, a relatively organic funnel. The idea that I currently have is I'm going to use tinfoil and duct tape to make enough of a funnel structure so that if I drop a die in the eyeball, it will roll through the skull and then out through the base of the skull and be collected in the open jaw. That's the current plan. So, here goes nothing. Okay, hi, I'm back. It's been multiple days. And now, I'm gonna actually be working on this. Oh man, I should have, like, gone through the shopping list of things that I required for this prior to hitting record. But we're here now! Yay. Hey! Okay, this is needlessly difficult. It's working out, though. It worked! Cool. So now, from what I can tell, inside there's nowhere that a die can really get stuck. But what I am going to try to do is see if I can manage to get some tape up into here. So now I can't see any tinfoil sticking out of here. So what's left for me to do is just adhere this to the turntable plinth that I will be attaching everything to. Then it's just a matter of figuring out how exactly I want to lay out the scenery around the skull here, which is certainly going to be interesting. I've just piled tape around the base of the skull there because I can just build up whatever debris and features around the base of the skull for hiding that, but also to increase the structural integrity of everything. So that way nothing falls off, nothing comes loose. Yay! This is working, which I'm very happy about. It's kind of the least I can ask it to do.
A few moments later.
Small problem. Oh, yep. Okay. This wood is too smooth for me to actually be gluing stuff to it. So I'm gonna have to get one of my wire brushes out and scratch the crap out of the surface. So that way there's actually, like, texture for the glue to adhere into so that it's not just flat against the surface and therefore not holding anything on. Aside from that, this has gone well. So, yay. Hey, everyone. So, future editing Bryce here, just popping in to say, yeah, past me was an idiot and didn't check OBS, so I proceeded to record, like, a collective total of, like, an hour worth of my analysis and discussing planning and things, without actually recording any audio. So I'm just gonna run through what I can in my current state, and also being like a month into the future from when I recorded these clips. So I did manage to successfully glue the skull, but the wire brush didn't really work on the bamboo wood. So what I had to do was take a box cutter and just scratch it in like 4 different directions, so that way there was plenty of texture for the glue to really adhere into. The next step in the plan was to start building up the scenery around the skull, and to do that I decided to get out my hot wire cutter and start just hacking up some spare bits of XPS foam that I had lying around for making tabletop terrain. It mostly just involved cutting it as much as I had to in order to make it fit nicely, and then sort of slotting it in place, checking how the framing worked, how I felt about the shapes and the scale at play. But I did know that I sort of wanted more bulk at the back toward the rear of the skull, mostly so that way you can always easily peer down and see what you've rolled. And then from here, what I did was I took some PVA glue, I just absolutely pasted that all over the base, put the XPS foam and the styrofoam. If I were to do this all over again, if I were to make a second one or anything like that, I would not use the regular polystyrene. The polystyrene I found would not set hard. When you paste like Mod Podge or PVA glue or something like that onto XPS foam, extruded polystyrene, then you kind of end up getting what is like a hardened shell to it. It still can get affected by pressure, but it isn't squishy by any means. The polystyrene absolutely remained squishy, even though I pasted Mod Podge over it, and then I even coated it in I believe like a resin-based sand paste gel thing that you'll see me applying here, and I was really hoping that the combination of these things would mean that that polystyrene would set very hard. But that thankfully has seen like an increase in its durability because of what I applied. So yeah, if I were to redo all of this all over again, I would absolutely only be using XPS foam. But yeah, and then I applied that paste over all of the parts that I wished to eventually make look like dirt, and I kind of just wanted everywhere that wasn't the skull to look like dirt. So I applied that wherever I saw fit, and then it was like a week-long waiting game that I had to play before it was all dried nicely, especially in like the deeper sections of it. But during that time, I was able to sculpt up some mushroom stems out of some tinfoil cylinders that I had put Warbler around the outside of, and then I sort of just bent those to shape, put them in the sort of cracks and crevices of the scenery of the diorama, figured out what shapes I wanted where before continuing to wait for that to dry before I could glue those in and then get to making the mushroom caps and additional scenery. Now, even further future editing, Bryce here. So it seems I did enable audio recording past this point, so we'll be going back to all of the pre-recorded footage now, and I do just want to apologize for the change in audio quality. But aside from that, here we go. I have done all of this. Now, the skull has all of this texture paste that I applied. There's a bunch of like texture paste that I have applied to all of the base here, covering the seams of everything. I've applied a bit of it onto the skull as well, which you may be able to see, but it will absolutely help me cover up any seams, particularly the awful mold line that is on the back of the skull there. And, as you can see, I have also sculpted the heads of all of the mushrooms. I've decided to get rid of the Lazy Susan aspect of this. This won't be able to sort of seamlessly spin on the table. I found that when I was attaching it to that, it was kind of just spinning by itself sometimes because the weight of the back of the skull certainly outweighs the front. If the table is slightly uneven, then it just sort of coasts in whatever direction it wants to, which is pretty annoying. Aside from that, I have also sculpted some... Well, I attempted to sculpt some sort of shelf mushrooms, and they're okay. I think I can probably save them with some paint, but I am also considering resculpting some different ones and then applying them over these ones. And then I asked my flatmate for some assistance with decorating this, and they have made the very important contribution of giving the worm a hat. So the worm has a hat now, and I'm not getting rid of that, so the worm has a hat. Aside from that, I have also laid some foam clay inside the eye socket here, and covered some seams in the tape that I lined that passageway with, and now, you didn't see that. Yay! It works! By the time I'm done with this, what I'm probably going to end up doing is just coating the bottom of this in 1mm thick EVA foam or some felt or something so that it has like a little bit more grip to it, and then it can just go on the table, and if I need to turn it, I will turn it, and that's all there is to it.
One eternity later.
So I'm back. I sort of unsuccessfully tried turning this section here into a bit more of like a regular rock looking thing, but I don't really know what happened to the foam clay. It just kind of turned weird, and now it has this sort of like cold magma look to it. I've applied one of my new shelf mushrooms to the back of the skull here, and I have more. I didn't make that many of these. I figured I would sort of make less of them and then just make them bigger. These also didn't shrink as much as I was expecting, which is interesting. Now it is going to be a fun game of figuring out where exactly to glue these on this and then fill in the gaps from there. Instead of applying like a dirt layer to everything here, what I'll just do is I'll paint all of this to be like dirt, and then I have some green grass flock that I can then apply over everything, and that will look incredible. So I'm excited for that. It's just kind of attaching the different shelf mushrooms to this. I will glue these together, and then from there we get to fill in some gaps between those, and then it's moving on to painting. So from here, all I did was apply the mushroom shelves, the new mushroom shelves, over the old ones using some quick working, just general use super glue. I would kind of just mix and match the mushrooms until I found one that I felt was a good shape and size for a particular placement. And then, yeah, I just put some super glue on that, apply it into place. It would adhere pretty quickly thanks to the super glue, and then later on I could just apply more foam clay to the like the connecting point between the shelf and the skull so that I could make the seams a lot more natural looking. And while I was at it, my plan was also to add some mushroom gills underneath each shelf. Now, during the process of doing this, I also figured I would remove the entire cluster of shelf mushrooms from the front of the skull to kind of just open up all of that space. I felt like, especially with the larger mushrooms, it was just going to end up getting way too busy, so I just peeled that off pretty easily, and was able to
dedicate more attention to the back of it. And here you can see the final results of me applying the extra foam clay to the areas underneath and between each of the shelf mushrooms, and I think it turned out pretty damn good. Now that I was super happy with the results of the foam clay and the final results of the mushrooms that I sculpted, it meant that I could move on to painting. And what I did for that was I just took my rattle can of Army Painter's Undead Flesh primer, and I applied that across the entire build and let it not only dry, but also I gave it extra time to cure so that it wouldn't be stinking up my small office that I have here.
All done and beautifully coated. Now, what I get to do is I get to actually paint this. Now, there are a couple of spots that I have found, I did put foam clay in here just so that when a die lands in there, it kind of is a little bit more visible and not so tucked into the corner there. Though, the problem here is the foam clay has actually peeled away from the jawbone there, so that's perfectly fine. The solution to that is going to be, once this is painted, I am going to apply a sort of green grass, like moss flock to it, and I can use that to gap fill any portions of this that require it, so yippee. For now, we're just going to worry about painting this, and I will be starting with the skull here, and then working my way up from there. Yay, let's go.
Now, this was just a process of applying, first off, in the more recessed parts of the skull, some relatively thick brown paint, and then I figured I would just apply it to a lot of the face, and then it was a case of applying thinner brown paint to the rest of the skull, just to sort of give it more texture and variety and color tones and stuff, and then it was filling in all of the dirt with just thick, regular brown paint. Some of it was just the paint as it came out of the bottle, and other portions of it that I actually watered down the paint quite a bit, just so that the dirt would have a variety of color tones, and it would come out a bit more natural looking.
Okay, it's been like an hour, and this is looking sufficiently horrifying. So, from here, now I get to start applying different colors to this and working on getting some bone brown colors going on with the skull there. So, let's get to it.
And this is where I applied a bunch of watered down Citadel contrast paint to give some really nice undertones and splotches to this diorama.
Okay, so it looks pretty cool. I love it. So, now we have a bunch of stuff going on here with colors and things. I do really love the streaks that have run down the skull. I really love the orange that's going on there, and I love the multiple tones of color that we have in the dirt there. Now, just painting this thing to look like a skull with dirt around it. I'm thinking maybe before that I should paint the mushrooms, though. So, we'll see how that goes. I'm gonna look up some images of different mushrooms right now and see how I feel. Oh, hell yeah. This is helpful. I'm thinking that the mushrooms may end up being much more of like a yellow tone. So, I feel like that has actually turned out quite well. What I need to do is I need to find my dead flesh that I have somewhere on my shelf here, and then just clean these mushrooms up and then do some dry brushing and stuff. And then it should be absolutely fine. So, here we go.
And I did just that, actually. I went over all of the mushrooms and I cleaned up any spots where I had gotten some of the brown paint on it. From there, I just went over pretty much everything with some dry brushing. I just went over the oyster mushrooms. The mushrooms got some highlights toward their tops, and on the skull, I figured if I was dry brushing, I may as well just get all of the dry brushing out of the way. So yeah, this is me applying all of the mid-tones to everything, and then I think throughout this process I also ended up, once that had sufficiently dried, I just applied all of the highlights and kind of worked my way up in multiple different tones depending on what I was painting. So that way every aspect of this would have a different color tone to it. Before, I applied some Citadel contrast paint to the mushrooms, and the yellow, I do have to say, popped very nicely with this. Before I, while that was still wet, applied some of the Gryph-hound orange to the edges of those and sort of like stroked it upward toward the tip of the mushroom cap. That way the edges had a nice sort of natural looking feathering of color to them, and that was it.
There we go! Some beautiful mushrooms going on there. I'm thinking some gray and then some white on these to sort of like separate them a bit more from the skull color. But aside from that, honestly, looking really good. We're gonna keep it going.
So from here, what I just did was I added the final highlights of dry brushing to both the skull and the oyster mushrooms. Now, I did make sure to apply a different color to each of these. The skull got just plain white, while the shelf mushrooms got a stonewall gray. That way there was some better distinction between the two surfaces. And then it was on to one of the best parts of this, which was painting Greg the Worm. I gave him a nice undercoat in a sort of watered down, mottled, dark purple before I killed some time by painting up that weird magma rock that I made in a nice regular rocky gray. Then I added some brown, just dirt staining sections to wherever I thought I was going to be adding the moss paste that I was going to be mixing up in a bit, and I was very excited about that. So what you can see here is me adding brown paint to certain sections and then just rubbing it with my finger to get rid of anywhere on the more raised sections, and it gives a nice effect of sort of dirt mud staining on the skull and gives the impression that it was sort of under dirt for a considerable amount of time. It adds some weathering to it and some aging, and I really like doing that with all of my projects. I then moved on to actually giving Greg the Worm some definition. So I took some watered down squid pink and I just brushed that onto him, making sure to keep it nice and consistent in direction, so that way he would end up looking nice and lovely as a final product. Though I did want to make him look a little bit squishy and gross, because I love painting up squishy and gross things. And speaking of squishy and gross, we then moved from painting Greg the Worm himself to painting his fedora. Now, for this, I literally just painted it black. I saw no reason to go too complex with it. I feel that it being the highest point of the entire diorama has it stand out enough, so I just applied some black paint to it and then some very dark blue as a bit of a highlight to it, just to add some extra dimension to it, stop it from being too flat, while also not having it stand out far too much. And then from there, it was moving on to all of the final little touches, like darkening the rolling tray itself and applying some of my basing gravel to the just surrounds of the diorama, just so that it would look a little bit more natural, with gravel and grit and dirt and little bits of moss and sort of foliage debris all about it, before I finally made one of my favorite things, which is a moss paste. I have two different colors of flock, so I mixed up two different colors and just applied that to wherever I felt moss could spring up across this skull and its surroundings, and I think it turned out incredibly well.
This is pretty much done,
aside from the final couple of details that I need to glue on now before we get into varnishing.
which means grass tufts. I love grass tufts. Alright, and with that, this is all beautifully nasty, really. I think that that is everything that I need to apply to this. So now, painting the edge of this, and then from there, we are good, shall we? Alright, so we have this all nice and beautifully varnished. I don't know for certain that I got the tops of these mushrooms. I think I did, but I might just apply some, like, Mod Podge to them, I guess, and I need to apply some resin to Greg the Worm there. This is pretty much done, and I am very, very happy with it. I think that it looks absolutely fantastic. So, without further rambling, I'm going to get to applying that resin to Greg and the Mod Podge to the mushrooms. I have applied the resin to Greg the Worm here, and I did go ahead and apply some little bits of it to the base, just to sort of like add some integrity to certain parts that I'm a little concerned about, like the gravel stuff kind of lifting from. I also put some dots of resin on a few of the mushrooms to sort of simulate like moisture on them. I figured that that would look good, so here we have, for now, the final product that is yet to dry. But, aside from that, this is done, I think. So, yippee. I don't really know what to say. I'm just very, very happy with this. Now we wait, again. And here we have it. It is fully dried. It has all of the resin applied that I wanted. Honestly, looks absolutely fantastic. I am so very happy with this. The final thing that I need to do is get my hands on some dried blood effects paint. I haven't been able to find any in my paint reserves here, so it's just a game of waiting until I can get my hands on some of that, and then I get to apply that sort of around the very base of the skull there, where the funnel opening is, around some of the eye sockets, maybe the nose a little bit, the back of the skull, I'm thinking maybe in here just a little bit. And then it will truly be done, but for now, this is absolutely brilliant. I truly, truly love this. I should make one of these as just like a wall mount, because that would be so cool to have on my wall. Oh no. That's a great idea. Oh no. Yeah, no, genuinely, very, very happy. Let's see, we'll start with a Dwarven Forge D20 here, which I'm just gonna drop into the hole in the skull, and that is a 9. Decidedly below average. So, we have discovered something about this. Apparently, if you rub Greg the Worm with the die for good luck, then you get a better roll. 14. Greg the Fedora Worm is a lucky Fedora Worm. This is one of my new favorite things that I have as decor. And now, I have something to threaten my players with, which is, I think, just something that every GM wants and needs. This looks incredible. I'm super happy about it, and you may see me make something very similar to it in the future because I like this so much, and I think that it would be such a cool thing to just have as like a wall mount. A little bit ambitious, but it was messy enough by design that I was kind of very comfortable with going at this and just experimenting, all while using different kinds of paints, different brands of paints, things like that, different techniques, and it's absolutely paid off. I'm incredibly happy with this thing. So from here, getting back into working on minis and stuff, I have a bunch of things that I need to paint up. I have one of the very next things that I have to do is this. I have a adult silver dragon mini that I have been meaning to paint for a while, and I very recently bought a Psychophage, maybe? I have a Tyrannid mini. I may be getting my hands on some more, and I'm going to be painting those up in a very interesting way sometime soon. I have a few other things in mind, and oh man, it's all just plans and plans and plans from here that we are actually executing, which is absolutely fantastic. Thank you very much for coming on this journey with me. I will see you in the next video. Kakitano, until next time.